Thank you for joining Equine Photography Conformation and Sale Horse webinar. What I started this for is right now during all the lockdowns and stay at homes and everything, I can't go out and do the normal sale photos, conformation shots, stallion photos that I normally do this time of year. And I know I have a lot of clients that are still needing to promote their horses, to sell their horses. So I wanted to give them an opportunity to kind of teach them a little bit so they can do their own and still keep their business going. So that is what I developed this for. So I hope you stay tuned to what we have to offer here and you will learn something. So to start out, I think you really need to understand horses' conformation. You need to be well prepared. I actually think sale horse photography is one of the harder things to do because there's so many different details, so much prep work to be done, and just a lot of a lot of things to go wrong with sale horse photography because we do want it pretty much perfect. So you got to think of we're going to go over location. We're going to go over what kind of equipment you need. I'm going to pretty much stress over and over and over how much patience you're going to have. You need to know the proper angles. There's certain angles that we do that we shoot the horse at. I want to stress to get a headshot always. And this is really super important, is finding the best light and finding how that light works best with your horse. All right, so if you know the conformation of a horse well, and you think you pretty much know it, kind of skip through a few of these slides because we're going to go over some very basic conformation details that are going to help you figure out the best angle for your horse and how it looks the best at certain angles. Some horses look better at a little bit different angle, just depending on their flaws or good qualities too. So we're going to go over a little bit about balance, functional correctness, and muscling and quality. We really don't photograph quality of movement for conformation photos, so we're not going to worry about that for today. So balance is very, very important. As you know, horses are divided into 3 equal parts. So make sure you evaluate the horse at a distance and close up before you start the photograph. That way you're kind of seeing what angles work best with it. If there's something, go close up and look at it. If there's something you want to kind of avoid a little bit showing, just kind of make a mental note and, of the flaws and the correctness of the horse. So when I say divide the horse into 3 equal parts, we have like an imaginary lines. So kind of at the front of the chest to kind of the heart girth area is one section, and then from the heart girth area to the loin, the flank, kind of right in front of this line's a little bit off, in front of the hindquarters too. And then from the hindquarters also to the tail head, basically. And then we have another line that kind of goes from the floor of the bottom of the hoofs to the chest floor, and then from the chest floor up to the withers. So those two also need to be equal parts too. A lot of our yearlings, of course, are not going to be always that, they're going to have a little bit longer legs at the time. So, always take that into consideration. The horse should also have a good proper shoulder angled and croup area. That really, that good shoulder makes that back a little bit straighter or shorter, sorry. So that will make the horse out balance. It makes the neck tie in better. Just a lot of different things correlate to that shoulder angle. So knowing also about structural correctness is going to help you set that horse up properly. Some horses are a little bit straighter through the hocks. So, especially the halter horses. So we kind of want to make sure that hock is going directly below, the horse is standing evenly underneath all 4 parts of its body. Nothing stretched out too much or pinched together too much. We do want that line coming down. You kind of can see the flaws that can really, even though the horse may not be flawed, if you set it improperly, it's going to look, over at the knee. It might look, under at the knee. The hock is going to look a little bit too sickled or too posty. Just depends a lot where you do it. Plus, stretching the leg out too much, too far, can also occur, mess up the horse's balance by making it look a little bit longer. All right. So muscle and quality, certain angles can make a horse look fuller and more muscled. So you kind of have to, work on, if you have a really well muscled horse, we love to do the 3/4 angle. We like to have the legs a little bit more square than this one is together. I'll explain that in a second. But, it really also can make or break the appearance of the head and the neck if it's placed too high or you have the wrong angle. If we angled this, if we stepped over a little bit more over to the camera right, we would get a little more long body look. This horse has a nice long neck. We don't really want to go over any further, but we want it to keep that angle to accentuate that neck a little bit. All right. So, you got to prepare. It's not just preparing the horse. Yes, we want this very, very nicely groomed horse. And we want to have it ready to go at the time. So, if you're doing it early morning, that means, getting up a little bit earlier. You want to have a good, clean location. I prefer not to have a fence line. I know that's pretty much almost impossible because, what our ranch is, we have fences everywhere. So I like to have one as far away from a fence as possible because we want that fence to be blurry. Because, a fence line can make the horse's angles look a little bit off. It gives that imaginary line and people are following that imaginary line of that fence and it might be going downhill, uphill of it. You also, I like, depending on what we're shooting, if we have a aged horse that's very leveled back, a good level spot we want to work with. If we're working with the younger horses, they're a little bit more downhill. We do want, a spot that might have a little hill that we can, our little slope to the hill. Not much, just a little bit that we can raise up the front end a little bit using that. Without having, if you have a fence in the background, that works really well because, you don't want to tilt the picture because they're downhill and then have your fence line and your tree lines and everything looking off. It kind of looks silly. So preferably not to have a fence line whatsoever. Get all your equipment ready, and we're going to go over what equipment you're going to have and have plenty of help. It takes to get a photo done easily 3 people. You need the photographer, you need the handler, and you need somebody to get ears up and maybe set legs too. Too many people, though, kind of overdoes it. We don't want too many people. So with the horse, we want to make it show ready. If you're in reining, you want that mane, very groomed. You want, it clipped where you want it, and you want it, a bath if you need to. They don't have to have a bath, but, if you can really, really groom them well to get rid of all the dirt and everything. And if you do give them a bath, make sure they're completely dry when you're ready for photos, because they can make spots look a little shadowy, and that kind of distorts the conformation of the horse a little bit when you have and it's just very distracting. If you are a hunter jumper, braiding it, if you're Western Pleasure, band it, have it show ready. I'm not really big on face grease, mainly because I like to shoot these sale horses in the full sun, and that shines too much off their face and it causes white highlights, and it's just distracting. I mean, we already usually use a silver halter, and that, really shines off of it too. So I actually, prefer a leather halter, unless you're really doing like show stuff. Then we do. If you need to lunge the horse beforehand just to get it to be attentive, go ahead and do it. I don't want you to lunge it too much because We do want the horse bright and alert, and sometimes that wears it down. We also don't want to, it's kind of hard to get it really show ready when you're lunging it right ahead of time. But you do, people do it at shows, so why not right before pictures too? So, the horse, what it needs. If you think you're going to need that horse lunge it. Even having it maybe turned out the day before, so it's not so bunched up, especially in the morning when we do shoots a lot of times in the morning. If you're shooting close to feeding time, which is because of our light, is a majority of the time that we do shoot. A lot of times horses are getting fed either in the evening or in the morning while we are doing the photos, and the horse is more focused and wanting to go eat. So always make sure the horse has a meal before starting. Even it doesn't have to be the full meal, but just let it have something. Plus, it'll be a little bit fuller and it will look better for pictures too, in my opinion. I prefer, and when I mean the cocktail, something like Ace or xylazine or something, I don't really like that unless there's a safety concern. The horse get that listless look in their eye. They can't stand right sometimes. They're harder to get ears up. So there's several other times. Unless there's a safety issue, try to avoid any relaxing stuff. Now, y'all might need cocktails after doing the photo shoot all day. So the location, I talked a little bit about the ground and fence lines already. So, I like to have the sun at my back slightly to an angle. I kind of want the sun going towards the horse a little bit at an angle because we want that chest to be lit up. We want the face to be lit up. We also want, at the profile, we want the head turned a little bit. So you don't want the shadow of the head going across the neck of the head. So you got to watch that because we do want the head slightly turned. And then also same with the 3/4. We don't want too much shadowing from the horse's head onto it. If it's windy, find something with a windbreak. I mean, there's a whole lot of different things that come into correlation about your location. Because tails blowing and mane blowing isn't always the best thing. If it is a windy day, we try to weight the tail down with grease or something a little bit. You have a long flowy mane, you may not be able to get that day unless you really do a whole lot of Photoshop work. You can shoot on the off mane side and kind of tape the mane down if you need to. Even bands, they blow up straight in the air, even if they're really banded down. Braids are about the only thing that really doesn't blow up in the air too much. So yeah, make sure your area is mowed and it's good and clean. We talked about the leveling. Try not to have a fence line. In the demo that I'm going to be showing today, there is quite a few fence lines. We did open up the gate, and I tried to shoot in front of the gate as much as possible. So I planned on removing the fence, and we try to be, but I made that as limited as possible in Photoshop later on. I didn't want to have to move a whole lot. Also, if you're somebody who sells a horse regularly or promotes a horse regularly, I would always shoot in the same time of day, the same spot, because it kind of becomes your brand. And then people, if they're looking through a sale catalog or something, they recognize that location and they're going, oh, that's so-and-so's horse. And they may take a look at it a little bit. So kind of, shoot in that same location all the time. So that way other people recognize, just like, if you post it to social media or if it's in a sale catalog, they're scrolling through and they see that and they know it as your location and your horse. All right. So some of the equipment that we need to do, we need several items, and I would make a list of this so you don't forget it. I prefer a plain leather halter. I like to have plain leather halters, now if it's a show horse, go ahead and use that show halter. But especially the young horses and everything, I do prefer a plain leather halter. If you're going to do some photos with the saddle on, go ahead and have it ready to go. So, because you're going to just have everything all ready, saddle, bridle, everything that you're going to have. If you're shooting with a bridle, Keep the reins up. Make sure the reins lie how you would put them on, how they would be on. So if you have a shank bit, you want the reins to lie all on one side. If you have a curb, not a curb bit, a snaffle bit, you want to lay them across like you would lie, like if you were riding. But have everything already. Have an extra lead shank to attach to the bridle. Be very careful not to pull the bit out as you're holding it, and then that way you can Photoshop that lead rope out later on, but the reins are still up. Don't hold the reins while you're doing it because they look funny kind of hanging off, but make sure the reins are up on the saddle. Have a grooming bag ready. A mane and tail brush, especially if it's windy. Towels, mainly for, the face gets dirty really fast, and to brush off the horse for, any dust that might land. We're putting all this product on it, so we have a lot of dust that will land on the horse. And lots of fly spray. I can't stress having fly spray. I don't care what time of year it is. Put fly spray on there. And I like to have 2 different types of fly spray, because if we're beginning, I like to have a fly spray, and then I like to have something that for mosquitoes and those little yard gnats that we get in the evenings. They're probably the worst thing ever. So I use mosquito halt as my favorite, so I might start out with a regular fly spray and then go to the mosquito halt later on. The props for getting ears, I like, I have lots of different things. My most favorite thing is my remote control car, because it kind of, I don't have to Photoshop it out. It's on the ground out of the way, and you'll see it in use later on today. But I use a stick horse. I use apps for on my phone. And then we need to have our camera equipment. I like to have a 200 millimeter lens, and we'll go over a little bit why later on the different type of distortion that you can get for not using something. I'm sure you've seen you use a camera phone and you shoot in front of the horse and the head's really big. So that kind of gets a little bit big. All right. So some of my, like I said, I use remote control car, I use pom-poms, I use sound apps. You can see different apps right here that I use. Elk sounds look really good. Avoid, sometimes, the horse sounds, if you want the horse's head level or low, the horse sounds will pop that head up. If you're using a stallion, a horse sound might get you a little bit unruly stallion for a second. So I avoid horse sounds, using them all the time. I mean, I will use them, but I use predator sounds. Elk sounds work really, really well. And different sounds like that will work. Donkey sounds do work very well. But like I said, sometimes it will put the horse's head up. And if you want the horse's head up, that's great. But if not, I try to use other stuff. Stick horses, I like that because they're on a stick. We can put it up to the horse's nose. The person's not really in the photo, and I can Photoshop that out pretty easily. I like pom-poms because the horse think of it as food. It reminds them of hay. I like that. But the remote control car is probably my favorite thing to use. I can put it off 50 feet away from the horse and move it closer if I need to, but I do like to start away from the horse quite a bit. But they kind of, if they notice it, they will pretty much watch it for a while. Some of them will snort at it and everything. I haven't really had any. I've had maybe one horse really just like out of here with it. But it was pretty close. We started out way too close to the horse. It can be done with a camera phone if that's all you have. You may not want to do a 3/4 picture with a camera phone, but you can do profile. So it's a lot about technique. And if you have access to a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, even better. I like to shoot at least 135 millimeters. 200 millimeters is better. If you shoot up close to your horse is going to look very distorted. It's not going to look as full as it should. There's just a whole lot of different things. I do recommend learning, if you have a DSLR or a mirrorless, learning how to use it. I do have a class on that. There's the link to it. You can easily find it on my website as well. We'll go over that a little bit later too. So my camera settings, if you know the camera settings. If not, go ahead and you might want to take my class. Is I want the horse completely in focus. Our normal thing is with the DSLR, we focus on the eye. So the eye, because the horse, even at a profile, the horse is wide. So the eye might be in focus, but the shoulder and the girth and everything may not be in focus. So I like to shoot at f4 4.0 or higher. Usually between f4.0 and 5.6 is usually what I use. And if it's full sun, I use aperture priority. I trust my camera to get the right shutter speed for me. In full sun, I know it's going to be plenty fast. If it's overcast or a little bit lower light, I do use manual settings. I still shoot at the same aperture priority. I make sure my shutter speed is at least 1/500th of a second, and then I adjust my ISO a little bit as I need it for that. I'm still liking to shoot at 200 millimeter. I know I've said that before, but I can't stress how important that really is. To get a good depth of field, and what that means is the depth of field is the stuff in the background. We want that kind of blurry. So if the background is kind of far away, you're going to get it's going to be more blurred out. If you have a fence line and it's 10 feet behind your horse, it's going to be very in focus. If it's 100 feet behind your horse, it's going to be very blurry. And that's kind of what you want, because you don't want that fence line to distract. You don't want anything else to distract you. Sometimes you might have, there's power lines, everything. There's a lot of different distractions. You may have buildings far back there. You just might not have a good spot. So just get as far away from it as possible. I know there's a lot of factors that come in of finding a good spot, and you may not have the perfect spot sometimes, and you might have to just use some Photoshop magic later on to do that. Also, shooting at 200 millimeters does give you that depth of field a little bit more. If you're close up, you're not going to have that blurring of the background too. All right, so getting plenty of help, like I said. You can do it with just a photographer and a handler, but it's not very easy. If you do just have a photographer and a handler, get a remote control car. That way they have that in the remote in their back pocket, and they can, handle the horse and then use the remote control car. I have also, as a photographer, hold the remote in my hand and take pictures. It's hard to hold my heavy camera and the remote at the same time, but I can do it. It's just easier with I recommend your horse handler and then somebody to set legs, and that person who sets legs can also be your ear getter upper at the same time. If you have somebody else getting ears up, somebody might be setting up legs and they're over there trying to get ears up. Well, by the time we come to do the picture, the horse is so used to whatever the ear getter upper is doing that the horse is acclimated to it and it could care less. So it's very, very important not to try to get ears up until your photographer is ready. The handler has the horse ready. Whoever's setting up the legs have the legs already. So it's very important. Also, it's really important too, and we'll go over this probably a little bit more, is whoever your horse handler is, when they're done setting the legs, they need to walk backwards away from the horse. They don't need to be walking away from the horse with their back, because the horse has a tendency to follow our backs. But if you step backwards away from the horse, it won't follow you. It may not follow you as well. Let everybody know. Have somebody instruct who's going to do what, because if not, you're going to have the horse handler trying to get ears up, and that just doesn't work because you have the shank in your hand and they get a little bit spooky sometimes. The biggest quality that everybody could have is patience, especially the photographer. Once somebody loses patience, everybody picks up on that, and everybody gets nervous, and everybody loses their patience. So patience is super, super important to have. So just, make sure everybody is working on their patience there. So light is very, very important because it can really make or break a photo, if you ask me. If you take it midday and you have these harsh horse shadows, that full horse that you have is going to have this dark shadow under its belly, and it's going to look thinner. So kind of watch your shadows too. So early in the day or late in the day is best, depending. Sometimes, just depending on your location. If you know where your location is, you want that sun to, be a little bit behind you. So if you normally shoot in this one spot and decide, oh, I'm going to shoot this afternoon instead of the morning, and you realize the light is horrible, you might want to delay that shoot or find another location if you have to have that photo done by then. But yeah, it really, light is just, if you talk to any photographer, light is, they look for light over location all the time. Like I said, midday causes lots of shadows, especially for those 3/4 pictures too. Once again, let everybody know what their job is, and once again, be patient. So there's several different poses we do. We'd like to do both sides of the profile, especially if you're doing sale. If it's promo, you don't have to do both sides, but it's a good idea if you're doing a sale photo to do both sides. You want to do some profile headshots. You want to do some 3/4 photos. You want to do that classic turn headshot, and then you might want to do an optional rear 3/4 image. It's some disciplines and some breeds is a little bit more popular, so you might want to add that. Not so much optional, but make sure you do it. And then if you're doing some promos, go ahead and get some artistic photos in, some close-up details. And I always wait to do those last, because sometimes it doesn't really matter if the horse's ears are up or anything like that, because you're getting really close-up details. And then always do the most important image first. And I always say one of the profile images usually is the most important. So get the best side first, because you may not get as good of the image for when you do the second side by the time you get to it. So I kind of like to go in a little flow where we do the profile. I walk up and do a headshot. We turn the horse and we do a 3/4. I go up and do the turn headshot. And then we'll go ahead and do the other side of the horse. If we need that, and then I do that rear shot if we don't always do it, and I'll get my artistic ones afterwards. You don't have to do artistic ones if you're doing a sale horse, but if you're doing promo, I would. All right. So this is kind of the setup that I like to do. I find my light, and this is a little bit too angled, the sun, but I want it to kind of show how far we're getting back. So I wouldn't quite have the sun right there. I'd have it a little bit more over. But watch the direction of the shadow of the horse. See how this one is kind of the shadow you want a little bit behind the horse at an angle. If the angle is kind of going forward, it's still on the other side of the horse, but it's going forward, your sun is too much at the rear of the horse. You want it near the front of the horse. So you want the sun kind of that angle a little bit. It could be a little bit more right behind you, or more right behind the horse, to it, but I prefer the sun to be a little bit ahead of it. I do like to shoot from behind the girth a little, and this being said is whatever's closest to the camera looks the biggest. So we want, that hindquarter to look a little bit fuller. We want the body to look a little bit fuller. So shooting a little bit behind the girth, not as much as this one's showing, but you do want to shoot a little bit behind the girth. Does this work for every horse? No, it does not. So that's where you really need to know what works best for the horse. And sometimes, I will shoot several different angles. I'll if the horse is behaving, I will shoot a few, move over, even 6 inches, or even less sometimes, and then move over a few more inches, and get several different angles of the horse. Because all horses look a little bit different, and just sometimes that few inch movement makes a world of difference too. This horse is looking straight on. We do want the horse's head bent in a little bit, and you'll see some examples in a little bit. All right. So this is just a little video of kind of my instruction before I even start to shoot. You can see here we have the gate is opened up. So we don't need the sound on here. So I will, I instruct them. I'm telling them, how I want the horse to move. or be set up, because we want a little bit offset. We want to see all 4 legs when we're doing a profile. I'm instructing them where I want them to be. You can see I have the remote control car and I'm going to place it somewhere. So I do, like to instruct, she is, this is Cassidy Huckabee of Shining Sea Grula horses, and this is their stallion, Shining Success. Now he was a little uppity today for this because he recently had colic surgery and he's coming off stall rest, and he only can be hand walked at the time. Doesn't he look good though for being having 2 months stall rest? I think he looks really good. But anyways, so I'm kind of instructing there for the head needs to be tilted a little bit. I'm giving a lot of instruction ahead of time of how we want to do it. With the head, I want to be able to see that far corner of the eye. And we did have a lot of instruction with chickens too there. And so I'm going to tell them how to set up the legs, and I'm also explaining that I'm going to use a lot of hand signal and body signals because I'm so far away that we can't always communicate very well. So, I'm kind of explaining, what some of my hand signals are and where we need to be set. I know we kind of talked about the ground, and I was telling them, find this hole here, even though he's pretty level, so I'm not too worried about it. So, once again, we're looking for, the shadows. We want, the legs to be a little bit offset. So what I mean by the offset is we want the legs closest to the camera to be correct, and then the far legs are going to be in a little bit. They're going to be a little bit pinched together. So we see all 4 legs. We want a little bit of separation from the legs, not a whole lot. I always like to do like the toe to heel. So, kind of where the front leg, the correct leg is, the far leg needs to be starting the toe needs to be, kind of even with the heel of the correct leg, if that makes sense. The head carriage really, really depends not only on the horse, but it also depends on your discipline and what your discipline likes. Even though your discipline may call for a really low head, not all horses look really good with a low head, so you might want it a little bit higher than, maybe the ideal photo. Especially if you're selling a horse, I think it's a lot times have that horse looking its best, versus what's ideal. I stay low, and you're going to see me squat down a little bit. I'm instructing them quite a bit first because this is near the beginning, but I do like to squat down and stay low. I think horses just look fuller and look better, and they look taller, and it also changes the horizon. We try not to get the horizon going through the horse's head. It can, and we don't want it going like even with the top line too. I don't mind it going a little bit through the body, because we have to have a horizon. But see how I get low and I kind of squat down, and I am shooting from a little bit behind the shoulder. I'm shooting towards the shoulder, but from behind the shoulder just to get a little bit more. I do stay very, very back up, and I keep a mental checklist really quick. I go through head, neck, legs, tail, mane, forelock. I'm constantly thinking of this. And yes, sometimes we have to have, the person right there next to them because they might be a horse that steps forward and everything. I know he was a little bit too stretched out, and every time we moved him, he wanted to move a foot. That's why patience comes in, and sometimes you just don't get it right. You can spend 3 or 4 hours and just not get it right. All right. Okay, so this is kind of the profile view. No, it's not perfect, but you can kind of get an idea. That was what I was shooting, what the video was. So what could we improve on this image? What are your thoughts on improving with it? And I'm going to let you look at it a little bit before I kind of make my suggestions. you know, I see lots of flaws in it. But, so the front legs are he's kind of leaning forward. So the front legs are kind of leaning too. That sometimes is the case, especially with if we're using a stick horse or feed. That's why I don't like feeder treats. A lot of people use feed buckets and everything, and I'm not a big fan of that because horses have a tendency to lean forward. The back leg is too far stretched out. Not a whole lot, but enough. And a lot of it is looking stretched out because the horse is leaning forward. The horizon is a little cluttered. I did remove the fence line, the closest fence line. I did not remove the back fence line. There was power lines. I removed those. I was a little bit too far behind, I think, because he was on stall rest. He's not as physically fit. So I probably shot too far behind. I should have got a little bit more even with the girth, a little bit. The headset and carriage, I think the headset is fine. I want that a little bit pulled out. It makes a nice throat latch. It's turned in just a little bit much, not much though. Ideally, the headset or carriage might be okay because you got to look where it ties into his neck, or his neck ties into his shoulders. If it went too low, it would look too tight in too low. But it does make his top line, the head carriage does kind of make his top line look the best at that angle that I discovered. All right. So this is kind of what you can see what I edited out. It's kind of the, those pictures, what's there, what's not there. So you can see I did the front fence line and that gate. I shot, like I said, I shot between the gate. That was easy to, when those lines are going through the horse, those are a little bit more difficult to Photoshop out. So it was easy for me to shoot or to Photoshop out that one corner of the fence and the gate and the person. And then the tree limbs too, and the shank. So you can see what I did, and I might have cleaned up the bottom a little bit too. There is still a lot of horizontal lines going through because we shot in front of the arena too. If that was solid grass, it would have been a much more pleasing look. And I could Photoshop that in, but I wanted you to see it too. All right, so I did that. I did enhance the sky as well. I fixed some of the exposure, not much, and I did sharpen the image a little bit. I did not sharpen the background, and I did add a little bit of sky, just because it was dull looking to me. I didn't have to do that, and necessarily you really don't have to. I just kind of wanted to, just to add a little bit of a sky enhancement in there. It was a cool sky that day. So I did not change any conformation. I did fix the tail a little bit too. Tail is not a conformation change. I just pushed it in a little because it was windy. But no, I do not change conformation, and I suggest not changing it because you can get yourself into trouble later on, especially if it's a sale horse and a stallion too. So if you want to learn a little bit more on Photoshop techniques, I do have a class for that as well. All right, so here's a little bit more ideal. Full sun, you could tell the other one was a little bit cloudy day, so we have a nice shine to the horse. Horses are set up very much well underneath them. Their headset looks good for the actual horse. The first one is a yearling, and it is a little downhill. But we did have a little mound of dirt there, so it did stand up a little bit better, and you really can't tell that. What I needed to do, Photoshop out the handler's shadow. I forgot it. And then the second one, is a stallion, very correct stallion. His head looks great at that level. We did some with him with the head lower. And this is where he looks really good, I think, in this one. So he is gorgeous too. And that stallion is Bank on the Best, and he is standing at stud as well. All right. So also I do profile headshots. I always like to do, profile headshots, but this one, we're going to improve the image. I have too much turn of the head a little bit, so it kind of doesn't make the head as refined looking as it could. if the head was just turned a little bit slightly back to the horse's left, it would have been a much more appeasing. What else I don't like is the top line. I don't like the way I have it framed in the top line. So all we need to do is just crop that out, and it improves that top line a little bit there. And not saying the horse has a bad top line, but how you crop headshots can make a world of difference. I like to have the headshot cropped at the withers and then at the chest floor. If the head is lower, obviously we have to crop a little bit past, onto the forearms a little bit too. But it does make a big difference with a headshot. Okay, so for a 3/4, we, instead of the offset legs, we do want the horse to be square for that. We want the horse's head and neck and spine and everything to be straight out. We want it to look straight ahead. Now, once again, the head carriage varies on your discipline, and it also really does help, the conformation of the horse. You saw a second ago, I was, because they're far away from me, they can't hear me. It's windy, and I'm stretched out with my legs, trying to explain to them that his legs aren't right, that they need to be, too far apart. They're too close together. Let's pull them apart. Or I was either saying they're too far apart. Let's bring them in, because I know that happened on both instances on this video here. So I am getting far back. I do like to shoot to the point of the shoulder. He's too angled there, and I'm having him fix it. Sometimes also what I like to do, we had a few distractions. There was chickens over there. What I do like to do also with me is, once the horse is set up right, or we're in the location I want it, I like to step directly in front of the horse, and then I will take 2 or 3 giant steps sideways, and that usually puts me in the good angle that I want with it. Now, I do have to have the horse set up correctly before I even start, because if I was to shoot right there and get the correct angle, I'm going to get all that chicken coop, I'm going to get that arena and all that in the background, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to kind of stand off a little bit off to the side, and we're going to get that in the picture this way. I want to thank my daughter too for videoing this. Okay. All right. So you kind of can see here where I'm finding the light. So I do like the direct light to be on the chest or the shoulder of the horse. So we could move this even a little bit more over. So if you would imagine me stepping directly in front of the horse and taking 2 to 3 giant steps sideways, that would put me at the point of the shoulder, and I kind of like to have the point of the shoulder as where I want to be standing in front of. So I have like a degree angle away from the point of the shoulder, so I can get that. Depending on the time of day, we are going to get shadows on the chest from the horse's head. So that's why the light is really important, maybe to move it over a little bit if we are having that. You can see here, we have a little bit of we have a lot of shadowing on the head from the on the chest from the horse's head. But we have the neck, the head, and everything is all straight out on this one. All right. So is this perfect? No, it's not perfect. We want to have the legs to appear that they have four equal distances. So the front legs are a little close together. The back legs are a little far apart. But we do have kind of equality between that front right foot and the hind left foot. We still want the equal amounts of all 4 legs to look the same. We want it very square to look, together. And that's what your ideal is. Some horses, no, you need to move over a little bit to get that. To get the proper look of them. Some are a little bit longer and leaner, and they just don't look that good bunched up. So, know your horse, try several different angles, just like the profile side, do several, just move a few inches over each way to see which works. So I already talked about what I could be a little bit more, angle the horse a little bit more to my right to lessen those shadows up. Hind legs could be a little bit closer, and we need I kind of cut off the tail. So I probably could have filled the frame, not fill the frame as much with the horse, and get the whole tail in there, because I did leave that tail out. All right. So you can see what was photoshopped. I really didn't Photoshop the actual photo much with with regards to coloring and everything. We had pretty light right then. But I did, clean up I removed the handler, some stray hairs on the horse, the handler shadow, and there was a blemish on the face. Now, the blemish versus something permanent. The blemish, if it's not going to be there in a few months, I remove it. If it's something there permanently, I don't remove it. I do, like I said, to have more editing help, I do have an editing class that is basically for sale horse photography. We go a little bit deeper into a few other things, but it's removing backgrounds, it's removing lead ropes, removing people, getting shadows and fixing things like that. All right, so here's a little bit more ideal. And as you can see, none of them are all completely super square, because it really, really depends on the actual horse and what looks the best on the horse. Sorry, I have a dog in my lap here. So, sometimes some ways look better than the horse and the other, but, really important is light and how that light lands on it. We have one here saddled, and usually when they're saddled, I do angle them a little bit more. And a lot of the English horses, I angle a little bit more like this too. So it's personal preference sometimes too. I did get some others at the angle of it. It just really depends on what looks best on the horse, and that's what we decided looks best with this horse. All right, so I also do a classic turn head shot. So a lot of times I do it right when we do the 3/4, right after, because the horse is already at the angle I want. Sometimes we have to turn the horse, depending if we want the mane in the picture or not. So if we want the mane in the picture, we turn the horse away from me, so the mane bends around and we can see the mane. Because as you can see, if the horse was to have been the other way and we shot from the other direction, for one, the light wouldn't have been right. But the mane would have been covered up by its head and we wouldn't be able to see it unless it was a super long mane. Then we might want to shoot that way. But I try to stay that same, 3 steps in, from the head over to the point of shoulder. I want the light kind of on the chest and the shoulders. And then I use props and sounds to turn the head. If you try to pull the horse's head over, that's not always going to work. They're going to get a little jumpy and not want to turn their head for you. I think we used a remote. So yeah, this was when we actually took the picture, and this is super quick, and they're moving so fastly, and I got that shot and we were done. You can see I'm click, 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 because the horse's head's going all over the place. And that's about all we did. We got that and we were done with it. All right. So here's some different, ways we can do the horse. You can see I was talking about the mane. We want to be able to see the mane. Don't always want to see the mane too. We can do it tacked up with a saddle if you want. The roan horse is not the most ideal. It's kind of leaning in a little bit versus turning. And I like to see that bend of the neck, and I like to see that little muscle bulge sometimes. As you can see on the center horse, we have that little muscle bulge up here. That's my personal preference. It's not everybody else's personal preference of what you want to see. All right. So quick tips is get organized, make a list, have patience. If we need a break, take a break, by gosh. And that just doesn't mean the horse. That means your handler. Even the photographer sometimes just needs a mental break sometimes, especially with a difficult horse. go get some water, just take a mental break if you have to, before you lose patience. Shoot early or late in the day. Make sure the horse is fed. Have help, but not too much help. Know your breed standard, and know the discipline standard. I know a lot of different breeds have, especially quarter horses and paints and everything. There's so many different disciplines within that breed, and one discipline might have the head a little bit higher, one might have a little bit lower. So no, it's okay to break the rules if the horse doesn't look the best using the standard image. You see all these ones with the head really low, and if the horse doesn't look it that way, don't take it. Get something that looks better. All right. I want to give a shout out to Cassidy and Jimmy Huckabee of Shining Sea Gruel Horses and their stallion, Smoking Success, who they were the ones that were very kind and let me video. And then we used their stallion too. And you can find them all over on Facebook. She has a big following on Facebook. I also wanted to shout out to my daughter for doing the videoing and some of the behind the scenes stuff too. And if you want to learn more, I have lots of different classes, that could help with this. A lot of camera operation classes. If you have that camera sitting and if you're shooting on auto, and you want to learn how to get that depth of field, go ahead and check out these classes. There's a Photoshop class that is specifically for horse photographers or people with horses in that case. Learn how to remove those lead ropes, remove some background stuff, just different elements and basic things. And there's some other classes too that are specifically for photographers, but it never hurts to keep on learning, right? Thanks for joining in, and I will be back to work photographing as soon as they let the stay-at-home lift go. Talk to you soon.